My name's Dave. I run a company that is a small to medium-sized company. We've ranged over the years anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000, 12,000 apartment units, and ebbs and flows depending upon what our portfolio is. And we're all over the country. And we're really known for our economic research. And we take the top 100 markets in the country, split them up into sub-markets. We track employment movements between those sub-markets, and we invest in the path of demand. And we also minister in the path of demand. And it's important for us to be intentional, not only in our research, but in our ministry of where demand is. And one of the things that I just love about multifamily ministry is multifamily gives us the right to walk alongside of people and earn the right to be in their lives on a daily basis with management personnel, with our relationship with Apartment Life. We have ministers on the property that are reaching out. And we earn the right to speak into people's lives on a daily basis as friends. And when life happens, we're there. The demand is there. And I love it. I love chaos. I love COVID. I love catastrophes because it hits people up the side of the head and makes them second guess themselves, and they start looking for the Lord. And my function with my company is very simple. A lot of things I do are simple. How I do them is complex, but what I do is simple. And one of my pastors a few weeks ago gave a talk about the disciples, and when Jesus was taken up before their eyes, he said they were looking up intently into the sky as he was going. And suddenly 2 men dressed in white stood beside them. And they said, "Men of Galilee, what the hell are you doing?" It's in the Snyder paraphrased version, I'm sorry. They said, "This is the same Jesus who had been taken from you into heaven. He'll come back in the same way that you've seen him go to heaven." And my job is just one word. It's look. Look. When we're buying multi-million-dollar communities and dealing with our attorneys, dealing with our employees, it's look. That's all it is. And we practice our function of our company, and our function is investment excellence throughout the country. And that's a function, but the purpose of what we do is look. The purpose of what we do is pointing people to Christ, whether it's my attorney, whether it's our employees, whether it's our lender. It's look. And we've created a foundation because there is such a opportunity in America right now for all of us together to come together and change the multifamily industry. We can change it from the people working in the industry. We have 37% of our population living in multifamily, and we can be in a position to be with those people and say, look. The CDC put out a study recently that said that isolation and loneliness are at epidemic levels across America. And in multifamily, we've got the ability to not just have investor excellence and to have great returns, but to say, look, Jim, where are you at? Jim Walters? I can't see, but he's back there. Jim's on part of our foundation, and he's head of Mission 98. We're creating multi-housing ministries in key churches across the country who are willing to bring their people into a position, a strategic position of ministering to the multifamily communities around them. We're looking, or we're working with key churches that understand the word look and where they're going. Brad's here from Pillar Church in Scottsdale, and we did a report for Pillar. I mean, this is so typical of any church. I mean, they're not just good looking, but they're dynamic guys in the church and there. But we did this report. There's 11,800 apartment units within a 3-mile radius of their church. 11,800, 2.5 people per unit. That's 29,000 people. Research shows that 95% of those are unchurched. There's 26,000 people within a 3-mile radius. What are you going to do about it? And that's one of the things that I want to impart to you guys and here over the conference is we need to work with our churches, quit ignoring the multifamily people, that the population that are sitting around us. I am embarrassed personally that I go to church on Sunday, I drive by 16 apartment communities that are mostly unchurched, and then I go to church and talk about a mission trip to Uganda. I told a guy earlier, I'm trying to figure out what the Christian version of the term shit for brains is. And Chris Ford, he is so eloquent, he made it sound good. I don't. But it's absurd. It is absurd. And so that's what my company is. We're professional grunts. We serve our investors. We try to point our investors to the Lord and support them. We point our vendors, our attorneys to the Lord. We point our residents to the Lord. And from day one, from 6 in the morning till midnight, it's just look, he's coming back.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And I've heard that story a million times, but it's new every time. So I really enjoy the way Dave talks about himself. Pete?
Yeah. So I'm Pete Kelly, CEO of Apartment Life. We're a faith-based nonprofit that's been serving the multifamily industry for 23 years. Started in Dallas, Texas, and now we've expanded to about 40 states and serving 650 communities, about 230,000 units, about 500,000 residents each month. And the audience that we work with is really unique. When you think about people who live in multifamily housing, I think they're very close to God's heart. I mean, God loves the whole world. He loves all of us, but some of his children he has a special heart for. And when you think about people who are living in multifamily, a lot of them are economically disadvantaged. They want to be homeowners, but they just can't. They're just barely making ends meet. The median household income of an apartment resident is $39,000. That's the household income for the median family. Can you imagine raising a family on $39,000? These people are just really barely scraping by. And I think God has a tender heart for the people who are basically working poor. A lot of them are in transition. They're new to the country, they're new to the city, they're newly married, they're newly divorced sometimes, building a new home. Something new is going on in their life, and that transition has placed them in that apartment community oftentimes. And I think if we all went back to middle school and remembered a time when we were in transition, when we were stepping into the cafeteria for the first time wondering, who am I going to sit with? It's a pretty vulnerable feeling. And God cares about the people who are in transition. He knows what that feels like. Dave, you mentioned that they're lonely, and loneliness is an epidemic in the United States, but I think it's super duper pronounced, sadly, in these apartment communities, where you got these people who are just living in such close proximity with all these amazing amenities. You think it'd be like the most connected place in the world. But most apartment residents don't know their neighbors. Not long ago, I saw an article about a man in Dallas who had died in his apartment, and they didn't find his body for 3 years. All of his bills were on auto pay. Nobody knew that he had passed until his bank account was exhausted. And I got to think, how many people are living in these apartments that if they died today, nobody would notice? And that's the reality of the people that we're serving. Well, God sees them. God cares about these people. He's got a heart for them. And as Dave mentioned, they're disconnected from God as well. 95% of them are unchurched. So that's a staggering statistic when you think about it. We like to think of Europe as post-Christian, but the average European is actually 4 times more likely to go to church on Sunday than the average American apartment dweller. It's an unreached people group of staggering proportions. And sadly, the church doesn't know how to reach people like this, because these are often gated communities with non-solicitation policies. And yet they're incredibly open to the gospel if somebody will bring it to them. And so our faith-based nonprofit really helps address 2 of the greatest needs of apartment owners, which is resident retention and resident satisfaction. And what we found is that the more friendships somebody has in an apartment community, the happier they are and the longer they stay, even when rent goes up. And so we've got a program where we place 2 people in that community, and they're like the welcome wagon. They greet every new resident when they move in. They throw all the parties and events. They look for opportunities constantly to care for people. They'll even do a renewal visit 90 to 120 days before a resident's lease is set to renew. As they do that, it creates this sticky community where people actually know their neighbors and they have friendships. And they're like, I want to stay. And so they post positive online reviews. And so most of our clients are actually secular apartment owners that are paying for this business value add. But all of the people that we employ doing it are Christ followers, and their real mission is to love their neighbors in such a way that they can win the right to share the gospel with people. And because of the scope that God's allowed us to serve, on average, every 15 minutes, at least during the waking hour of the day, somebody's hearing the gospel from an Apartment Life team. Every 15 minutes. That means while we're sitting in this room, somebody is likely having the most important conversation of their life, how to have a relationship with God. Right now, it's happening probably somewhere in the world. And on average, every day, somebody becomes a follower of Jesus. And we're just scratching the surface. I mean, Apartment Life's only on 650 communities. It's not even 1% of the population that's out there. But imagine if every apartment community had some kind of faith-based mission taking place, what could be possible?
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. No, I was going to say, in the, just from a personal perspective, from Dave, our relationship, and Pete, ours, and Apartment Life, I've seen the blessing, I've seen the fruit, personally in our company, and how Apartment Life leans in and really goes above and beyond, not just the individual community assignment, right? But we've leaned into Apartment Life for all kinds of things that happen within our team, in the various markets, and in our extension, right? Hands and feet in the right way, right? Of being able to invest and invite, and what Dave referred to earlier as earning the right to introduce someone to Jesus, right? At the end of the day. So as we think about, and I'll give my thoughts on this one too, but as it relates to, Dave, your approach, Pete, your approach in your vocation, either indirect or direct ways in ministry. What has been the fruit that you've seen? I think it's always good. It's not about patting ourselves on the back, but being grateful and thinking about, praise and thanksgiving of what has been the fruit, right, of your approach.
The fruit is part of our eternal rate of return, and you guys are going to meet and see people throughout this conference that have different methodologies and how they live out their faith in the marketplace. And ours is one of collaboration. I've known these guys for 20 years. I suddenly realized the other day that I've known Jeremy for 20 years. I have nose hairs older than him. And so it's very humbling. But the fruit it's one of collaboration. You'll meet other people. Chuck Weldon in his ministries, they do a lot of things in-house, and they take care of things in-house. A little bit different approach, very, very effective. I'm envious, and he does so many things well. There's other people here that have different approaches. Our approach is one of collaboration. Apartment Life gives me the ability to bring them in. They have personnel on our properties, and then we collaborate with Jeremy, and we know that we have competent management on our properties, and it allows me to have more time to not only dealing with the function of my business, but the purpose of my business, because I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm a big believer in collaboration. What does collaboration look like? We had a property. We used to be the largest owner in Louisville, Kentucky for a while. We had a property that was behind a mall there, and we had a woman that got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And she had 3 months to live, instead of saying, hey, we got to rent this apartment in 3 months, we instead gave her husband and the family, they had 3 kids, a year or 2 free rent. And then we went out to the residents, the other 460 units on the property, and invited them to come and support these people. And they had an economic drive. There was so many people. They weren't faith-based. They were there bringing meals. They were raising money and doing all sorts of things. We were just sort of the instigator of it. But the fruit was something that it got a reputation. This property was hidden behind a mall. You had to know it was there to get there, even though it was a big property. And it was dependent upon advertising. Our advertising budget for the next 2 years went down 85% because there was so much word of mouth where people could say, hey, these guys really care for me. This is a place where I want to live. This is part of my community. We took out 85% of our advertising budget. So the fruit was great. We were able to minister to people, but it had marketplace returns to us at the same time.
Pete, how about some fruit?
Well, we love to measure things, obviously, but the thing that means most to me are actually the stories of the changed lives. So back in September, I try to make a practice to call one of our Apartment Life coordinators or teams every week. And in September, I reached out to this one in Houston, Brad and Rainey Goad. He's 60 years old. His wife's 58. And I was shocked to learn that he actually sold his house to do Apartment Life. And he is on staff at one of the largest churches in Houston, Second Baptist. He's one of the staff members. And he goes, I just want to get out of the church bubble, and I want to get to know my neighbors. And he said over the last 3 years, all of his friendship circles have totally changed, and now they're oriented around his neighbors. And he's had the privilege of connecting people to Second and seeing them get baptized. But he told me, he goes, the one guy I'm the most excited about is a guy named Abdul, who's a Muslim immigrant from Syria. And I met him the first month that I was an Apartment Life team. So I've been building this relationship for 3 years with Abdul. And he goes, something's happened in the last 5 months. He's surprisingly spiritually open. He's reading the Bible with me. We're talking about the things of God. And then just last week, I get this email, Abdul came to Christ. Isn't that amazing? And so, again, we want to reach people like Abdul, but what are the chances that Abdul's just going to show up at Second Baptist on his own? It really is not inviting people to come to church necessarily, but it's sending the church to where the people are. And that's what I love about what Brad and Rainey are doing.
That's great. From, just thinking about, again, what fruit have you seen in your approach? And I think about, again, being a part of a larger team, right? A senior exec team, and not everyone being a follower or having a faith background based in, Jesus, if you will. But seeing the fruits of being faithful, right? President of our company, Woody Stone, who's a dear friend, we worked together for a long time. Wish he could have been here, but we're starting to see that. Okay, we thought here recently, kind of implementing what we talk about as the 10 little things for our company, right? It's like, okay, what we do is manage real estate across the globe. What we're about is what we refer to as care first and care most, right? And I'm not going to read the 10 little things, but the first one is we cultivate a culture of care. And the idea being that 6 months from now, I want to be able to be on one of our communities and go and have a cup of coffee with a maintenance team member and just be able to ask the question, what are the 10 little things? And that team member would know them, and they've been embodied, right? It's about everything we do. We start every meeting either going through all of them or selecting one, right? And recognizing someone through that. But it's been, I think, the Lord's way of saying, hey, you can be sophisticated in putting the cross in view, right? In these 10 little things. And now these 10 little things being adopted through the entire really the entire company, right? So industrial and office and all the different groups have now started to implement the idea of care first, care most, right? And how that's working itself out in the fruit, right, is like an example. Even though it's a tragedy, it's horrific, but the Lord is moving in a way and using it, for good. Like we had. It was a month ago, we had a very prominent commercial office broker in Dallas who everyone knew, was highly regarded in the business, was very involved in the community. And just about anyone who would say anything about Mike, it would be the same story, right? Mike would do anything for anybody. And Mike struggled with what Pete was referring to, not only in our residents, right, in our apartment buildings, struggle with loneliness, but here's someone who struggled with loneliness, perhaps chemicals in his brain not being able to be managed, right? And a month ago on a Sunday morning, Mike decided that there was no other alternative but to, take his own life, right? And so, okay, how does God move in that situation? In an office full of 150 people, the market not exactly being at the top, high interest rates, all the anxiety, right, that moves through the business in this part of the cycle. But now seeing that people are connecting, right? People that are Jesus followers are coming out of the woodwork left and right, and it being okay to talk about it and put those action steps in the context of a public company. I think, I'll just wrap up in the answer here on this one, but to me, it's, pardon my nomenclature, but it's a lie from hell that if you work for a public company that you can't put the cross in view, right?
There you go.
And the fruit being is that, it's like, yes, I will. Yes, I, will write a handwritten note of encouragement to someone in the C-suite who I know may live their life in an opposite direction of the things of God, right? But it's not our responsibility for the actual consequence of it. It's just to actually do it. So I think even in the darkness, there's been just incredible fruit, and I think it's just kind of the beginning. Next topic we had talked about last week was, as it relates to faith-forward real estate endeavors, investments, developments, providing services. Dave, can you talk about what success looks like to you, in that?
Success, to me, equals influence, and your calling equals influence, and capital equals influence, as far as I'm concerned. And, there's only two justifications for work, as I see it in the Bible. I'm sorry, you people do exist. I'm just ignoring you. But there are two justifications for work in the Bible. One is a tent-making opportunity to support your ministry. And that's great, very similar to Paul. But the second is like Daniel as a platform for your ministry. And Daniel was excellent in secular pursuits. He was respected. He was a politician. He was a project manager. He was excellent, but he had a different purpose. And the reason I like dealing with these guys is Cushman and Wakefield has a level of excellence. I have no patience for people that think that God's going to make the investment work just because they're going to give money to God. He doesn't need your money, and he's not a divine mechanic. And we need to strive for excellence. As Christian professionals, we need to strive for excellence. And the service that we provide equals influence. And the influence comes in many different ways. I had several thousand apartment units in Houston during Hurricane Katrina, and it gave us an opportunity to minister to people. We had I forget, 1,000 or so apartment units in Las Vegas, and we had employees and residents shot during the Las Vegas massacre. And it was an opportunity for ministry, and it was an opportunity to come in alongside of people. And it's not just residents. We deal with institutional investors, and we deal with high net worth individuals. Some of our partners are Mercedes-Benz Pension Fund, Nippon Steel. Tom Cunningham from Devon, USA is here, U.S.-based Japanese group. We deal with some very large institutional investors as well as high net worth individual investors. Well, one of the big Middle Eastern firms, InvestCorp out of New York, had a several $100 million portfolio with us, and the guy that we answered to, his father died. And instead of just sending flowers and this and that, we had a guy on our staff at the time, Jim Hallisey, that Jim flew back, got a hotel near Brad's house, or near the guy's house, and was just a professional grunt for 2 weeks. He went over and mowed their lawn. He went over and served food when the relatives came, for the wake, and took out their trash. Just professional grunts. That was early 90s, and to this day, that Jewish man still has a close relationship with us and calls me for advice. He calls me for prayer, because we exemplified Christ to him, and And we just modeled Christ. And we were just saying, look. And that, to me, that's what fruit looks like. We can't get full of ourselves. We're professional grunts, and that's what God's called us to.
Pete?
All right. Do you mind repeating the question?
Oh, yeah. Sure. The question is, as it relates to faith-forward, endeavors, investments, development, and, providing services, right? Apartment life. How do you measure success, and what does success look like?
Yeah, so as a faith-based nonprofit, we have a word that we have coined to describe who we are, our identity, and it's called the word business tree, which is a mashup of business and ministry. And so we are always thinking, even though we want to reach people for Christ, we're always thinking about both the business impact and the spiritual impact on the same time. And so that makes it hard to find coordinators, because they have to not only love Jesus and love their neighbors really well, but they also have to deliver what the client's asking for. And again, most of our clients are not faith-aligned. We love it when we can serve people who are faith-aligned, but a lot of them, they're like, hey, we expect a certain level of excellence. And so we measure what's important to the client. Ron Witten of Witten Advisors, really respected economic firm within the multifamily industry, has done multiple studies on the impact that apartment life has on our owners. And they said, on average, you are saving your owners or bringing $188,000 a year of value to your apartment owners. So they've been able to quantify that. So that's important, because if we're not providing tangible business value, we get cut, and then we lose the mission field. And so we have to be very serious on both fronts. Like, we want to really provide excellent business, and as we do that, that is our platform to get to know our neighbors and, in the context of relationship, to share Christ with them.
That's great. And when I think about that, that question, again, at a company or a personal level, what does success look like? And I just think about, what would be individual gospel presentations, right? Like, I have a client who is a highly educated, sophisticated guy who grew up in India, was educated in Saudi, and is a practicing Muslim who is the nicest guy you could ever meet. And to me, it's success is that, there's becoming more and more just the privilege that I get to, number one, just know him. It's not so much just about the business side, right? But that whether it's me or someone else, there's going to come a day, there's going to come a time, a season in his life where perhaps he's open, right? And just the earnestness of the God that he prays to, right? It's sincere, in that he'll send me a text message and say, hey, I heard about this and praying for you and your family. And so that's a small yet large success and measurement of, over time, right? It's not something thunderous, and 1,000 people coming to know the Lord in a day, these things we hear about, but just over time, just getting to have that privilege through a business environment. Again, about that concept of being sent, right? And maybe the entire purpose of me and this gentleman doing business together has nothing to do about the investments and the returns and all those kind of things, and everything to do that the trajectory of his life and his children, influence, and family could be ever changed just by being faithful, right? So, next topic is, and these are just more tangible and practical, right? But what are spiritual ideas do you have where you're applying faith, day to day in leadership and business? I know some of that topic may cross over some of the things we've already talked about, but what are some very practical ways that you're applying your faith today in, again, the business environment?
We're applying our practical faith through a very intentional effort through a foundation we created 4 years ago called Community Growth Foundation. There's a QR code on your tables if you ever want to go to the website and see our vision production report of what we're doing there. Scan it, go there. It'll show you what we're doing. But we are on a goal to change the multifamily industry, to impact the multifamily industry. We are moving forward with Community Growth Fund, with the foundation to own and fund other operators, 2,000 units in 10 different cities. We want 20,000 units. Sounds really good. One problem, it's going to take $1.5 billion in equity. It's a small problem, but that's our God's problem. So we want to do 2,000 units, 10 cities that will have certainly a return influence for their investors, but also a ministry impact. We want to fund other programs, and we've got different ownerships and we're probably on our 6th or 7th property now and developing some properties too through that fund. And we're funding programs, whether it's Apartment Life or Mission 98 or other programs that are affecting people's social lives. We're in the beginning stages of bringing Jeremy and Cushman and Wakefield, some of their people, in to work with us to create a curriculum for Christ-based property management. There are no educational standards in property management in this country. There's no maturity standards either. A lot of the personnel the bar is pretty low. And you have some companies like Jeremy's at Cushman and Wakefield that try to raise the bar. But in general, people are not educated for Christ-based property management. I can't find one Christian university that has a real estate property management program in the curriculum. And what better way, what better position to sit there and minister to people, in a Christ-based way, but to manage properties, alongside of them. We brought in Jim Walters, who I mentioned to you with Mission 98. We're creating pilot churches around the country where our goal is to have 4 pilot churches. We want them to understand the impact that they can have in multifamily and to take it seriously. 1 Chronicles 16:9 says, I wish I could say this. I keep getting emotional and I apologize. But 1 Chronicles 16:9, for the eyes of the Lord range to and fro throughout the earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose hearts are committed to him. Why the heck aren't you living like that? Is that verse really true? Why aren't we living like that? And I want God to show himself strong on my behalf. And I want to just follow him. We want to train management professionals. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of effort. But we want to train management professionals in these areas. And through Mission 98, we have put together websites, training resources, how to do a prayer walk, how to create a multi-housing ministry in your church. And not only that, but we're trying to be aggressive about it, where we want churches to take this seriously. You bring us 20 people that are willing to be involved in multi-housing ministry, and you bring in a first-class director that is going to marshal the troops and be productive in that ministry of those 29,000 people that live within a 3-mile radius of you. We'll pay half his salary for 3 years, or her salary for 3 years. We're putting our money where our mouth is. There's an opportunity here. We want you guys to take action. And then the last thing that, you didn't know what you were opening up, did you? The last thing that we're opening up and doing is creating a real estate conference for faith-based individuals to come together across the country to empower those faith-based individuals. I could care less whether you own a rental house, a duplex, or you're sitting here with 30,000 apartment units, whatever. It doesn't matter. God has put these people in your life for a reason, and our goal is to empower you so that you will claim 1 Chronicles 16:9, for the eyes of the Lord range to and fro throughout the earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose hearts are fully committed to him. And I don't care whether it's a rental house, 1,000-unit complex, community, or whatever. We want to try to empower you. So there's some methodology and strategy behind what you're seeing here, and the conference is just part of the methodology that we're trying to move forward. And this vision in practicality is not going to move forward unless a lot of people in this room come together and make it happen in the future years.
So Pete, you get to interface with so many different folks, and we share a lot of the same clients per se, right? That come from different backgrounds, really from all over the U.S. and all over the globe. But in addition to the obvious, what are some, if there's a story or some strategies you guys are thinking about of apartment life and how to apply faith, right? In what I would say a very, creative way that's relevant in today's business environment.
Well, 2 years ago, we partnered with a group called the Community Impact Fund based out of Denver, Colorado. And they had an interesting concept that the average American, I forget, they might have $200 in savings. And so if their car breaks down or a major appliance goes out, they don't have the emergency reserves to cover that expense. So they end up putting it on a credit card, and it ends up putting them in financial bondage. And we realized that that's probably happening with our employees and with our coordinators. And so we partnered with the Community Impact Fund. What they do, it's really, anyone could do this. Anyone could reach out to them right now and set this up. But you can set up a fund for your employees where they can borrow up to $3,000 at 0% interest. And it's got a flexible payback plan with an incentive. Once you successfully pay back your loan, 10% of it comes back to you for an emergency fund to build that. And so it's a great way to really care for your employees, to meet their practical needs, but also help them build an emergency fund. So that would be maybe one tangible thing that we've done. About 2 years ago, we put $200,000 in it, and immediately people started to use it. But now the balance is replenishing itself each month as people are paying back their loans. That money is getting replenished, and so it's maintaining about $100,000 balance right now. So it's a pretty cool way to create an employee assistance fund that replenishes itself.
That's great. Yeah, I would say some very practical ways in application. We have our community service program at Cushman that's called Cushwake Community, falls under my platform, and we're addressing. And of course, again, a lot of companies do this. Your companies do this. The big ones do it. But when it comes to addressing, food insecurity, emotional insecurity, right, mental health challenges, and although yes, we manage, right, a lot of rooftops of all different kinds, it's okay with the leverage of Cushman and its partners and influence. How can we get a roof over the heads of the folks who really just do not have access to it all? And I'm talking beyond attainable or affordable housing, right? We're addressing homelessness and those kinds of things. And then also, how are we to leverage our influence on helping people get in position to opportunities, education, training, right? So I think about that three-legged stool of having something to eat, having a roof over your head, and having hope and an opportunity. Okay, that sounds very secular, and it is, right? pretty basic needs. Okay, how are we applying faith? Well, what it comes down to is being surrounded by those, including C-suite individuals in the company, who their purpose and their drive through that is being the hands and feet of Jesus, right? And that changes things. You have to do it in a very creative way, but it is coming from that place. It is not coming from just an ESG mandate because we're, again, public and we think we need to do all these things in ESG. It is coming from being convicted that this is what Jesus would have us do, right? It's like you think about our business and there's an amazing amount of financial resources, right? Most of this world lives on not even $2 American a day, right? So you think about that, right? And I know for myself and others, right? Hey, I'm saved. If I go to sleep tonight and don't wake up, I'm going to be with Jesus. But I would obviously be able to answer to, whoa, what did you do with the things, right, you were stewarded with? And no, I'm not a majority stockholder in Cushman, right? But in a lot of ways, you kind of have the influence and the keys to those kingdom, right? And so if anything I've learned is being more creative in that secular public company environment where, again, for the majority, the Lord's not exactly blessed, but at the same time, it's no excuse not to apply those very tangible things, right? And again, we talked about the fruit. So next topic, and again, some of these just really blend to each other, but what impact opportunities do you find? Again, I talk about a couple of ones in secular, business, and again, it's all, Father in His glory, but He's allowed it to happen, and this is very tangible, and that is okay. Every Friday morning, 7:45 a.m. to 8 a.m. Central, I host a commercial real estate prayer call. Right? There's probably a ton of these things around, and I just felt convicted to do it. And it's through Cushman and Wakefield Microsoft Teams, right? And there's no pushback. To date, there hasn't been the slap on the hand to, hey, don't do that. And I think it's along the lines of, because there are leaders in Cushman who are invited to it, who are well above my pay grade, who listen in. And it's a very no-frills thing. We'll share a word in Scripture of encouragement, and then we pray. But what's come through that, right? Again, if there is a purpose, and obviously large across the country people praying, is that again it's giving access and the green light for someone, not just for a prayer request, but could you tell me more about? Right? Could you tell me more about this Jesus that's being talked about on Friday mornings? Because my life is, my life's going to hell, and I'm, X, Y, Z, right? So it's just about, opportunity. As we start to kind of wrap up before we go into, Q&A, next, kind of last topic is, although there are many ways to put the cross in view in our business environment, what are the top, gentlemen, what are the top gaps that need to be filled within purpose-built rental housing, in today's environment, right? If we just kind of cut to it, in your view, what are the top gaps that need to be filled in rental housing today?
One of the gaps that exist, I feel, is that multifamily is misunderstood. When I talk to people in general about multifamily or pastors, they immediately go to low income. Oh, well, yeah, we need to minister more to lower income people. Well, that's true, but 37% of our population lives in multifamily. We have some low income units. We have some workforce housing units. We used to own a property in south part of Houston, League City, that every apartment had its own yacht slip, and the rent started at $6,000 a month. who's ministering to those people? You know, we had an apartment in central part of Houston that had a Ferrari dealership on the main floor and retail, and the rest, you know, then the community was just very high end. Apartments are multi-demographical from income basis, and there's just this misunderstanding as far as who lives in multifamily and what the needs are. And that's one of the biggest problems that I see today is the need to understand them, the need to minister at all income levels to those people.
I would say for apartment life, you know, our 50-year vision is to be able to serve any church or apartment community in the world. And as I mentioned, we're currently serving about 1% of what we could be serving. But I'd say the next horizons that we need to figure out, we've figured out how to do Class A, Class B, Class C, and now we're doing affordable and senior. But student housing, that's a new horizon for us to figure out how to do it. Single-family build-to-rent communities, I think that's going to be a big thing on the horizon. A lot more people living in neighborhoods that are owned by one company and managed by one company. But I think long-term, we're figuring out how do we take this model in the U.S. international? Because when you think of most of the world does not live in single-family homes. Like if you go to China, there are massive blocks of housing that cover multiple blocks that have 1 million residents. And we need a strategy that would be a business as mission strategy to reach people living in those communities.
It's great. Yeah, what I think about as it relates to not just Cushman, but just the old environment is really about what I would call kingdom placemaking. And that being, well, what if, and there's probably going to be discussions about this later, but what is the relationship between multi-housing or, you know, again, built to rent, single family for rent, like that I'm knee deep in every day? What's the relationship between that and existing, right, church fellowships and church planting, right? There was a topic yesterday about, and later today about, you know, church real estate and those kinds of things. But, you know, what's the opportunity to put great housing on the ground that is purpose-built and purpose-driven from a spiritual standpoint in the context of, again, church-owned real estate, right? You know, thousands and thousands of acres that are sitting on the ground today and not having anything on them because of a lack of funding from a church perspective, okay? But what if you have 25 acres that can be rezoned or zoned to put housing that's 100 yards from the church campus building, right? And so what better way? So when I think about, again, kingdom placemaking, it's what could that look like? Again, it's not trying to be in your face to guests, right, in the world, but again, trying to be smart about it, right, as it relates to that availability. I'm not saying that's an original idea, but I think that's where it goes, right? Because it's like, okay, we still read about the American dream, and occasionally Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae will put something on the back of the Wall Street Journal that, okay, home ownership, still the American dream. But there's also a lot about that that's an absolute lie, right, and what that means, right? Because it's not just about, you know, owning a home and running back and forth to the soccer fields and living in the, what I would kind of call the suburban fog. But again, how can we as owners, operators, and all that, and church planters begin to think about that? Because there's no better way to have direct access, right? And to Dave's point, nearly 40%, right, of the country living in, you know, multifamily housing of some kind.